What happens when one of the most respected actors in Hollywood sits down for what should be a friendly chat, only to be met with relentless hostility and disrespect? In just 27 seconds, a television host managed to turn a routine interview into an explosive confrontation that would see a legendary actor storm off the set in disgust. This is the shocking moment when Anthony Hopkins had enough of Denise Welch on Loose Women. The morning began like any other on the Loose Women stage. The audience buzzed with excitement, eager for a rare conversation with one of Hollywood's greatest living actors. Cameras were set, lights were perfect, and the panelists sat ready behind their famous desk. Anthony Hopkins walked out in a tailored navy suit, the very definition of class, and the entire room erupted with applause. He smiled warmly, settling into his seat as the hosts welcomed him. Nadia Sawalha adjusted her notes nervously. Jane Moore watched quietly from the far end, and Kay Adams tried to keep the atmosphere light. But the moment Denise Welch leaned forward with that sharp, probing gaze, an uneasiness settled over the studio. Her questions started out innocently enough, but the tension built fast, too fast. Hopkins answered everything calmly, offering thoughtful reflections on his career, his craft, and his latest project. He was professional, charming, and patient. Then Denise decided to push a line no one expected. "So Anthony, you've played some really dark characters. Does that come from a dark place inside you? Or are you just good at pretending?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure if they should zoom in or cut away. Hopkins paused, surprised but still composed. He explained, politely, that acting draws on imagination and experience. But Denise didn't stop there. She pushed harder. "But you have to admit, there's something unsettling about you. People say you're intimidating. Do you enjoy that?" Gasps rippled across the studio. Nadia tried to soften the tone. Jane straightened in shock, and Kay looked ready to intervene, but Denise cut everyone off, insisting she was just asking what everyone was thinking. Hopkins' expression tightened. His patience thinned. Still, he refused to match hostility with hostility. But when Denise leaned back, smirking, and said, "People find you creepy," the room fell into absolute silence. Something shifted. Hopkins had been disrespected before, but this was different. This was personal, public, and completely unnecessary. He leaned back, inhaled deeply, and the look in his eyes said everything. The interview wasn't salvageable. Something was about to break. The air in the studio felt heavier with every passing second. Anthony Hopkins, known for his calm composure in even the most intense situations, now sat motionless, his jaw tight, and his eyes fixed on Denise with a chilling mixture of disbelief and restraint. The other panelists exchanged worried glances, silently pleading for the situation to correct itself. But Denise showed no sign of stepping back. If anything, the tension seemed to embolden her. Nadia finally tried to intervene, her voice firm but controlled. She reminded the panel and the viewers that Hopkins was a guest, someone they had invited with respect and admiration. Jane nodded in agreement, adding that the conversation had veered into inappropriate territory. Kay, always the mediator, gently suggested they shift to a different topic, hoping to restore some normalcy before things escalated further. But Denise was unmoved. She rolled her eyes dramatically, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh, please. If he can't handle a bit of honesty, what's he doing here?" Her words echoed through the stunned silence of the audience. A few people gasped. Others whispered to one another, trying to process the unfolding confrontation. Hopkins closed his eyes briefly, as though gathering whatever patience he had left. When he opened them again, his voice was calm but carried a quiet, unmistakable authority. He explained that he had always treated interviewers, colleagues, and fans with respect, but he would not remain in a setting where he was being personally attacked. His tone was not angry. It was disappointed, almost sorrowful. And that disappointment was far more powerful than rage ever could be. Denise laughed, an abrupt, awkward sound that only made the atmosphere more unbearable. She insisted again that she was just doing her job, brushing off the gravity of her comments. But the panelists weren't buying it anymore. Their faces showed frustration, embarrassment, and a shared understanding that something irreversible had just happened. Hopkins reached down and unclipped his microphone with steady hands. The audience held its breath as he stood, straightened his jacket, and addressed the viewers directly. He apologized, not for his actions, but for the uncomfortable situation they had witnessed. He thanked the other hosts for their attempts to steer things back on track and made it clear that what had taken place on that stage was unacceptable. As he walked away, the studio erupted, not in chaos, but in applause. Supportive, sympathetic applause. Denise sat frozen, her confidence evaporating as the weight of what had just happened began to settle around her like fog. Backstage, the atmosphere was nothing short of chaotic. Producers rushed between monitors and headsets, trying to determine how to salvage the remainder of the broadcast, while crew members whispered among themselves, stunned by what had unfolded. Anthony Hopkins, however, remained the picture of composure as he entered his dressing room. The door closed behind him, muffling the frantic noise outside. For the first time since stepping onto the Loose Women set, he allowed himself a quiet moment to breathe. A nervous production assistant knocked lightly on the door and peeked inside. She apologized profusely on behalf of the team, her voice trembling, as she tried to reassure him that the others had not anticipated such disrespect. Hopkins gave her a gentle smile and thanked her for her kindness. He held no malice toward the staff. They had not caused the problem. They were simply caught in the crossfire of a situation that spiraled far beyond their control. While Hopkins gathered his belongings, word of his exit spread quickly throughout the building. Crew members who had admired him for years approached cautiously, offering handshakes and sincere apologies. Each one expected frustration, maybe even anger, but Hopkins remained gracious, thanking them for their professionalism. His calmness only made Denise's behavior look worse in comparison. Meanwhile, on set, the remaining panelists struggled to continue. Denise attempted to shift into the next segment with forced enthusiasm, but it was useless. Nadia's arms were crossed tightly, her expression stormy. Jane stared down at her notes, flipping pages even though she clearly wasn't reading them. Kay sat rigidly, lips pressed together as she avoided eye contact with Denise altogether. The audience, once lively and cheerful, now sat stiff, their discomfort palpable. When the cameras finally cut to a commercial break, the tension exploded. Nadia turned to Denise immediately, demanding to know what had possessed her to ambush their guests so aggressively. Jane added her frustration, reminding Denise that they all shared responsibility for the show's reputation. Even Kay, who rarely raised her voice, insisted that Denise had crossed a professional and moral boundary. Denise, still defiant, tried to defend herself. She insisted that she had every right to ask difficult questions, and claimed that Hopkins had overreacted, but her explanation fell flat. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that she didn't understand, or refused to understand, the magnitude of the damage she had caused. The argument ended only because the next segment had to begin, but the damage to their relationship was already done. Outside the studio walls, the situation escalated faster than anyone expected. Within minutes of the incident airing, short clips of Anthony Hopkins walking off the Loose Women set began circulating on social media. Viewers who had been watching live uploaded the footage with captions expressing disbelief, disappointment, and outrage. The clip spread across platforms like wildfire, gathering millions of views before the episode had even finished broadcasting. News outlets picked it up immediately. By the time the panelists returned from their commercial break, headlines were already forming online. Anthony Hopkins walks out after hosts disrespect. Loose Women sparks backlash over treatment of legendary actor. And Denise Welch faces heat after tense on-air confrontation. Each headline added more pressure to the already fragile atmosphere inside the studio, as producers scrambled behind the scenes to prepare statements and damage control strategies. The panelists' own phones buzzed nonstop. Nadia, Jane, and Kay quickly skimmed through notifications, their faces falling with every message. They knew the public reaction would be bad, but the sheer intensity of it left them shaken. Viewers were furious, not just disappointed, but actively demanding accountability. Denise, meanwhile, tried to pretend it didn't bother her. She scrolled through comments with a stubborn expression, insisting that people were overreacting. But her confidence wavered every time a new post appeared criticizing her behavior. Some commenters defended her right to ask direct questions, but the overwhelming majority condemned the disrespect she showed. Even fans who usually supported her found it difficult to justify what they had witnessed. As the episode wrapped, the panelists exited the set with heavy steps. In the backstage hallway, another confrontation erupted. Jane confronted Denise first, her voice firm but controlled. She accused Denise of damaging the show's integrity and embarrassing the entire team. Nadia added that Hopkins had been nothing but respectful and did not deserve such treatment. Kay, who normally tried to mediate tension, told Denise plainly that she needed to take responsibility for her actions. Denise snapped back, insisting she had done nothing wrong. She claimed she was simply being honest and bold, but the justification sounded increasingly hollow. The panelists shook their heads, realizing that Denise wasn't ready to acknowledge the damage she had caused. As the crew packed up equipment and the studio emptied, a sense of heaviness lingered in the air. Hopkins was already gone, but the impact of the incident was only beginning. The fallout, public, professional, and personal, would continue to unfold long after the cameras stopped rolling.